Donkey Kong, the original antagonist to Mario. Entering the 90s, Donkey Kong got a completely new rebrand thanks to the Donkey Kong Country series, and that was probably the best thing Nintendo could have done for DK. With the first game out of an eventual trilogy selling 9 million copies over the years, it was a huge success, and many regard the Donkey Kong Country games as some of the best platforming games on the Super Nintendo console, and some may say that across all systems as a whole. With such a decently sized fanbase of this Mario affiliated character, these games have continued to hold up very well, spawning in a whole new series that would continue well beyond the Super Nintendo's life. Some have held on to these original games so much that they know them inside and out. With that has come people that have studied the game and have found all sorts of ways to optimize and sometimes even completely glitch the game. In this video, I want to talk about the world record in one of the most popular Donkey Kong Country speedruns, all stages. That's right, beating every single stage in every single world back to back as quickly as possible. This in recent times has led top runs to be in the very low 30-minute territory, with a sub 30-minute run being very possible any day now. Maybe it's already happened when you're watching this, but either way, Lovebird 920 has been a leading force in making this happen and has beaten the record in this category over 20 times now. Enough rambling, let's get straight into it. Today, let's tear apart and explain the world record for Donkey Kong Country all stages. So, Donkey Kong Country. I imagine quite a lot of you have either played or at least are somewhat familiar with how this game goes, but for those who don't, let's quickly talk about it. Spanning a total of 7 worlds and 40 stages, the very last world simply consists of King K. Rool, who alongside his Kremling army stole bananas possessed by the Kong family. Each normal world consists of a handful of levels with different themes, a mix of swimming, riding minecarts, riding a select list of animal buddies, and everything in between. Each world also ends with a brief boss fight as well. Oh yeah, and besides Donkey Kong, you have a secondary player you can switch to, Diddy Kong. With general game information out of the way, that perfectly takes us into the speedrun side of things. The most crucial thing to know by far is that Diddy Kong is used for the majority of this run. While Donkey Kong is used at certain points, he is mainly used for specific bosses and glitches. An even more important thing to harp on is the actual movement in this game. Watching any run in this game, you will see runners heavily abuse rolling mechanics, and to overall sum it up, rolling on its own is way faster than simply running. And rolling through an enemy while holding Y is even faster than that. In fact, you can gain even more speed for each additional enemy hit, with a cap of up to 4 enemies. If you also start a roll while running, it's important to note that the roll will die at the end of a cartwheel movement, but to keep moving with rolls, you can jump out of a roll before it ends. If you're rolling through an enemy though, this isn't that much of a concern. Besides just speed, rolls can also be extended going across gaps, tires, or ledges. In fact, I just said the word extended, which means I need to also specifically cover extended rolling, or what some specific runners may refer to as extendos. Extendos are all about managing when you initiate speed boosts by releasing and pressing the Y button. In fact, if you want a specific quick dive into rolling mechanics in Donkey Kong Country 1, I would specifically recommend you watch the video The Rolling Mechanics of Donkey Kong Country by Silent Wolf 444, linked below. He gives a perfectly simplistic example of an extended roll here. You can start a roll with a Y button press, then let go of Y before rolling through an enemy, and then repress Y after rolling through the enemy to decide when you want the speed boost, with you needing to do this before the roll ends to achieve this boost. With that, there's only one more thing that I need to mention: version differences. There's a handful of versions of this game between Japanese, American, and PAL, as well as multiple numbered versions across some of these: 1.0, 1.1, and 1.2. Speedrunning this game, the best version to use is the 1.0 version of the American release. Why is this? Well, when it comes to different regions, PAL is pretty easy to piece together that it is slower between frame rate and general gameplay, and Japanese ends up being approximately 52 seconds slower in all stages due to one thing: not being able to skip the fanfare after beating each stage, with this being possible on other versions. In regards to numbered versions, many glitches do not work on 1.2, and there is one specific trick that is only possible on 1.0, starting the game with a funky plane. And I guess while I start to explain this trick, we are immediately hopping into the beginning of this run. On version 1.0, if you press down within 30 frames after pressing start upon game boot up, you will start the beginning of the game with Funky's plane, which allows you to move faster on the overworld map. Most of the time save here actually comes from load times due to the music not changing between file select and overworld if doing this trick. In total, this saves 1.2 seconds, a nice free immediate time save in the run. Entering the first level, Jungle Hijinks, the first immediate course of action here is getting access to Diddy Kong as quickly as possible. Here you can crack open the DK barrel on the exact same frame as taking damage, which allows you a smooth transition into playing as Diddy. Besides that, the main important thing that makes this a really challenging first level to optimize is rolling. For half the level here, you will see what is an Omega Extendo. Omega Extended rolls typically refer to a series of holding Y through enemies, tapping Y through enemies, and repressing Y after the final enemy. Here, you'll see rolling action start up right away with this critter above, and continues to build up speed with multiple more enemies right after. I also want to point out a slightly slower but more common level start strategy that allows me to explain many more things about this game. You'll see at the beginning of this approach that this roll is started on the left side of this tree, which is slightly faster than just rolling off the platform. To make this gap, you'll see the B button still being held while starting to go above the gap. This concept is dubbed float storage and is used by runners to stay airborne throughout the run in different parts, such as being shot out of barrels or entering stages. The only other thing to point out here is the tiny gap at the very end of the level, where you need to time another roll the second your previous roll ends, with an early attempt at this not allowing you to properly make it over the gap. Moving over to stage 2, Ropey Rampage, this level is way tamer than the last. The main worry here is simply taking the bonus room, because once exiting, it launches you across the stage, which is very much faster than playing the level normally. Reptile Rumble is where things heat up a little more once again. This is a very tech-heavy stage. First of all, you can roll through barrels with a Y press, but you have to also release Y before the barrel, or it'll be grabbed. There are additionally multiple instances where you can roll through multiple enemies to gain speed. Notably, there's also manipulation of the camera to spawn a Kremling early so he can be rolled through. You can go far enough right to spawn the second Krem, and then move back left to start your roll. You'll notice that the fourth Kremling in this set is completely ignored, with hitting all 4 Krems being slightly slower than just 3. Not too long later, you'll also see this B is completely ignored thanks to extended rolling through these 2 snakes, which means holding Y while rolling through the first snake, releasing Y before touching the second snake, and then re-holding Y once past the snake. The last important thing here is that this is the first stage with crawl spaces. You can jump through them by holding down in them while jumping to avoid crawling. In this stage, however, holding down is not required, since the crawl spaces here only require 1 jump to get through. On top of this, you can zip through them by pressing Y after reaching only halfway through the crawl space, with it zipping you out to whichever side you are closest to. The 4th stage up to bat is Coral Capers, the first water stage of this run. These stages can be really hard to optimize. The main things that you can optimize in these water levels in regards to swimming is cutting corners and mashing during vertical sections. This level has the animal buddy in Guard the Swordfish, and before landing on him, you can press up and B to get an upwards boost. You'll notice his lunge pattern has a rhythm to it, and you most importantly can't lunge too fast, or you'll simply just end up dropping lunges. Doing one right before a corner also gives a slight boost in speed. Being able to squeeze through these sharks, these ones later in the level are avoided by cutting one of these corners, doing 3 lunges, and then immediately moving upwards towards the right side to just barely get by. You'll see a quick left movement is done to avoid bonking. The rest of the level is a pretty smooth ride, with a bunch more lunges to the end. Getting out of the water, the last true stage in this world is Barrel Cannon Canyon. This level becomes quite trivial thanks to taking shortcuts tucked away at the top of the stage. This is at least until the midway save barrel. You'll see that when being launched out of the barrel here, Y plus B plus right is held, which puts you into an ideal rolling situation when landing, which means, once again, we have another extendo, and is considered one of the hardest in the game due to how tight it is. Slowing it down, you can see how rapid the inputs are here. As you're going past this last Kremling in this section, you can jump above to a tree, which leads you to even more level skipping barrels. All that needs to be done after is rolling through one more Krem guarding the level's exit. With that completed, all we have left for World 1 is Naughty's Lair, the first boss of many in this run. There isn't anything too crazy about tackling this boss. It's all about jumping on him as quickly as possible when he is not in this cooldown sequence. This fight ends before much can even happen, only taking 5 hits. With one boss down and many more to go, this takes us into the second world of the game, Monkey Mines. The first stage, Winky's Walkway, is the shortest in this run out of the ones that don't have a warp. It starts off with a roll through the first critter, and then does a quick jump for yet another extendo. This allows you to both clear the gap and go up the ramp. The other important thing here is the naughties. You want to avoid bouncing off them if possible, because all they will do is slow you down. You'll see the first couple are avoided by quickly letting go of the D-pad when jumping towards them. This takes us into Minecart Carnage, the first minecart involvement in this run. Luckily for the runner, this stage has a warp at the very start of the level, right at the bottom. With this level being harder to master in other runs, such as no major skips, this is a huge relief. This warp ends up shooting you into a cart later into the stage. You'll see that while landing into the cart, a full jump is buffered, with this being followed with more of this, albeit smaller jumps. Here, 2 more jumps are buffered in a way where you land right before the crash, and buffer yet another while above it. With a couple more buffers to end the stage, this moves us into Bouncy Bonanza, the toughest stage in World 2. The platforming overall is very hard due to all of the tires and crawl spaces. This results in not just the typical rolling shenanigans, but some more sipping in the previously mentioned crawl spaces. Reaching the tight bottom section of the stage, with efficient movement you can perform what are 2 B skips. By positioning yourself at the end of the crawl spaces, and then jumping and rolling before the bees complete their cycle, you can completely skip having to wait for these bees to go fully back and forth. Getting through all of that intensity, things calm down once more in Stop and Go Station. You can immediately hold left entering the stage to enter a warp. From here, it's just rolling through the exit. This is quite easy considering that these rock crocs will not hurt you if you are not in the middle of rolling, and will only do so if you jump while inside this enemy. To prevent a very minor slowdown at the end, you'll also see a quick right release and regrab at the very end, but with that only saving frames at most, that's all there is here. Millstone Mayhem, on the other hand, abuses the super jump, which allows you to get infinite vertical height as long as B is being held. In this specific use case, this is used to reach the warp barrel without doing the slower developer intended way, getting the tire and bringing it back to the warp. To set up this super jump, DK needs to take damage on a slope to achieve super jump storage. To know if you got it, you'll see DK fly up the screen after he dies. Once doing this, DK needs to be regrabbed from a DK barrel by both taking damage with Diddy and holding B. If all of this is done correctly, DK will get the height needed to make it up to the warp barrel. It's important to also clarify that this warp is exclusive to just Donkey Kong, with Diddy not being able to do this on his own. Doing all of this, the exit is not too far away. Last of all, you'll see runners roll through this millstone at the end, with the Kongs being invulnerable in the same way you are with the rock Crocs in the previous stage. This trick allows us to stumble into boss number 2, Necky's Nuts. This boss is harder than it looks. You want to get the hit on Necky as soon as he's about to spit out a nut. If you happen to be too early, however, you bounce back without hitting him, which ultimately loses a couple seconds. If you're late on the other hand, you take damage, which also loses a couple seconds since DK is immediately needed in the first stage of World 3. And speaking of World 3, we are now in Vine Valley. Like I said, it's very important to start with DK here, because there is a warp contained here that is a DK exclusive. If you lost DK in this previous level, you're looking at about 2.5 seconds of time loss from grabbing the barrel and swapping characters. What is interesting to note too is that this warp barrel is on a timer once it loads, and disappears if you don't reach it fast enough. But of course, if you're blazing through this level, that shouldn't be much of a problem. Once exiting this warp, right is quickly pressed to clear the mini Necky, and while landing, A is mashed to immediately switch back to Diddy. Overall, a pretty simplistic stage. Speaking of a simplistic stage, the same can be said for the next, Tree Top Town, thanks to another warp that is accessed by rolling through the beaver, jumping on the Necky, and then reaching a tire that is barely visible at the top of the screen, which takes you to yet another warp. I can promise you that there's a little bit more going on in Forest Frenzy. This level has a trick by the name Super Free Roll. First, you have to get the previously talked about super jump storage by taking damage at a ledge. This time it's a bit trickier, with this specific super jump storage being pixel perfect. What Lovebird does nowadays is a significantly harder version of this strategy, where he goes for the first Krem here and does 0 pause buffers, saving 3.5 seconds, versus the traditional setup where a pause buffer can fortunately be used. Pausing allows an examination of which frame the Kremling is positioned, and then Diddy can be moved based on that. The super jump is then achieved on the next Kremling, and the rope up ahead is grabbed, which is then followed by a dismount. The roll that can be extended here takes Diddy through the air and rolls through 2 more enemies along the way to gather more speed. This can ultimately take you all the way towards the end of the stage. Temple Tempest keeps up the intense gameplay, but this time in the form of 2 extendos. Omega extendos once more to be exact. The first is performed right after the save barrel through the naughty wheel, and is really hard and punishing if you fail. This can kill a good overall performance if you're not careful. The next one is later on in the level, powering through 4 Kremlings. In between, you'll see some vertical ropes that are grabbed, and one thing to note with them is that you don't have to fully wait for the ropes to come to a complete stop in order to jump off. You only need said ropes to become slower than your running speed. With the worlds getting increasingly longer, we still got 2 more levels to go, with the first being Orangutan Gang, except this isn't played normally like everything else here so far. Going back to Funky Kong to travel back to World 1, a map warp is performed to skip most of the level. For some reason, all corners on the World 1 map act as a level entry when a Kong or Funky plane is on a precise frame in the corner. Being able to activate this between the second and third stage, this is a 1-frame trick. You'll see Lovebird quickly press a few of the face buttons to achieve this, with some runners using this to increase their window for this trick if done correctly. With this trick only being possible on versions 1.0 and 1.1, this brings you to the end of the stage I just mentioned, which immediately takes us into Clam City, yet another water stage featuring Diddy's swordfish friend. Overall, the same things apply here as they did in the first water level, doing corner boosts when possible and avoiding any damage, which is fortunately an easy feat, with sharks here being in clusters. After all that is the third boss you have to go up against, Bumblebee Rumble. You can only hit the bee with a barrel when it is yellow, with it being invulnerable when red. This fight is not one you want to miss a hit in, cause if done can lead to cascading time loss via messed up cycles. Additionally, the lower the bee is killed at the end, the faster the fight will conclude, which is easy to observe here. World 4 Gorilla Glacier immediately starts with a huge trick in the stage Snow Barrel Blast. This is where a super jump roll will be performed, which is the combination of 2 other in-game glitches, super jump and jump roll. Super jump storage is achieved here by landing on the bee and then taking damage from the Neki up ahead. Waiting for the Neki towards the bottom of the screen here to fly in this pit, a frame-perfect jump roll is achieved. You'll see that this is followed by quickly rolling out of this and briefly waiting for 3 Nekis to line up. Going left and then back right to hit all 3 in order to build speed. This saves around 5 seconds thanks to flying straight to the stage exit. Next up to bat is Slip Slide Ride, which once again has a warp only intended for DK, except this time the rules can be broken a bit. Diddy here can climb up this rope and go above out of bounds to roll into the warp. This isn't too hard to do thanks to being able to jump off a Krem at the peak of its 5th jump. To quickly get up this rope, you'll see the usage of rope scaling, which is a matter of rapidly jumping off the rope and then back onto it. With these ropes notably being quite slippery, it's easy to shed some time here if thrown off. After this, all that is left to do is scale another rope, roll off the platform, and grab some more ropes to the end. Ice Age Valley is a bit more straightforward, being able to buffer a left roll input with left and Y. Diddy here grabs another animal buddy, Espresso the Ostrich. This helps with breezing through the rest of the stage, but make sure not to lose him, because for a top runner, this will end a run. You'll see that things are a lot easier thanks to being able to run through the mini Nekis without taking damage. Only their nuts can hurt you, and this factor is only possible on versions 1.0 and 1.1. Running down slopes to increase speed, landing on the specific slope can be a bit tricky. What you need to do here is space your mid-air flutters well enough in order to time your landing. Timing a jump into the exit, this can save up to 5 frames. Croctopus Chase has some more tech in store and features a new trick, Croc Express. But first, we need to backtrack. Going back into Ice Age Valley, the split up glitch is set up here. This consists of killing Diddy to make sure only one Kong is playable, and then pressing start plus select when throwing the DK barrel. Being mindful that getting hit will cause a soft block thanks to the game waiting for another character to appear, the stage is entered yet again. Getting hit over an empty pit here, this will prevent the soft block and cause the Kong to both fall below the death plane and put you back on the overworld map. Entering the stage one more time to grab Espresso, the game expects you to be in control of the second Kong after getting hit and falling. You can take advantage of this by grabbing the other Kong, and boom, you are now in control of both Kongs. Abusing this, DK will continue to run off the ledge and die, while Diddy grabs Espresso. Now playing Croctopus Chase for real this time, you now automatically start the level mounted on Espresso, instead of normally swimming through the level. Navigating this stage with Espresso is really tricky, but it is very much worth it, being able to save upwards of 24 seconds versus swimming. Optimally saving time here is a huge task though, between Espresso not being intended to climb the coral walls here, very precise jumps, and lastly, a very janky camera. Throughout the stage, certain camera triggers need to be hit in order to actually progress, with a huge chunk of this stage being played with the character off screen. Assuming that you got through such a tricky stage, following that is Torchlight Trouble. This level is quite short, yet also very dangerous. While normally the animal buddy Squawks would help light up the stage, he causes a bit of lag and is not recommended. One of the big things here is being able to roll off the edge of oil drums, with them not hurting Diddy on the right edge here. With a lot of these being executed throughout the stage, this can be a bit scary due to these having tight hitboxes. Additionally, if you have DK here, this won't work, with him not being able to safely land on the oil drums. There is yet another crawl space tip here as well, with DK being grabbed along the way. Avoiding any damage is crucial, with both Kongs needed in the next stage. And why is that? Well, there's another super jump roll and rope bridge rumble, requiring you to enter with Diddy in front. A DK barrel is immediately grabbed and thrown next to this wall. This is so that when taking damage for the super jump setup, you'll instantly grab the barrel with DK and crash it on the Krem enemy here. Jumping in specific spots here to position the army next to the tire, the super jump roll is achieved. with it optimally saving around 8 to 9 seconds. To end a world full of really difficult tricks, it's time to visit our friend Naughty. You can only do damage to him here when not in his cooldown phase, or when he's not doing high jumps. Every time you damage him, he also adds an extra jump to this cooldown phase. By bouncing off his head at the right time, a strategy is implemented here where you jump up to and wait in the left corner. This allows the player to damage Naughty as soon as his cooldown is over. If you thought things were going to simmer down a bit, then you are completely wrong. World 5, Kremkroc Industries, immediately starts up with yet another super jump roll in the stage Oil Drum Alley. The first course of action here is to take damage on the right side of the fire at the very start. To get super jump storage here, the DK barrel must be opened, which is followed by rolling in fire once more. To finally execute the super jump roll, you'll see a brief wait in order to line up this Krem to the right of the oil drum. If done optimally, this can save in the ballpark of 15 to 16 seconds over playing this stage normally. This trick used to be a lot harder when using a previous route, formerly needing a damageless setup using 2 Kongs, which meant not being able to take advantage from iframes after taking damage like done now. You may wonder, why did the route change here? Well, this is due to a new trick that was added in 2 stages from now, but we will get to that very shortly. Before approaching that, we have Trick Track Trek. This stage by itself would be the longest in the game, but fortunately there is a warp here, making this level quite trivial. All you need to really be aware of is the Mankey at the end. Alright, now we are on to the very intense stuff tucked into the stage, Elevator Antics. There's many reasons why this stage is a bit chaotic. First, going fast in this stage is not easy due to enemies around crawl spaces and tight rolls. One specific place that is easy to die at is around the roll off the can before 3 ropes. It's not only easy to fall into this pit, but there is also a bee you can roll into nearby. Immediately after, you need to also do a very tight jump into the crawl space and then bounce off the snake. Any mistiming here is fatal. Now it's time to dive into the true meat of this stage, Antics Blaster. This trick is so complicated to the point that even top runners don't fully understand it, but I'm going to try and do my best to explain here. The goal of this trick is to create an invisible object in order to manipulate the memory and objects in the game. This can be achieved by throwing a barrel and catching it again, followed by running into a save barrel with the original barrel in hand. The invisible object is set down near this mini Neki. Right above this enemy is the return barrel from an earlier bonus within the stage. This is the object that will be manipulated and will shoot you to the very end at an unfathomable speed. From here, a final right input needs to be done to exit the stage. While this trick may seem a bit complicated, many much prefer to do this over the previous super jump roll strategy. There are many different approaches for Antics Blaster, with 2 differences between these setups being if you want to do this with DK or Diddy. The strategy dubbed YOLO Diddy is the fastest of the bunch, but this only has a 33% chance of working with him. This is thanks to him having 3 different frames he cycles through while carrying an object with a specific frame needed when spawning the barrel above the Neki. There is also YOLO DK, which has the same general concept as before, except DK only has 2 cycling frames, increasing things to a 50% chance. Except this YOLO DK strategy is a bit harder to execute and is also 1 second slower than the Diddy equivalent, with the increased chances to land the trick being the huge main benefit here. This is the strategy that Lovebird currently goes for in runs. Overall, these approaches are around 16 seconds faster than optimally playing through the stage as intended. There are safer versions of these strategies that tons of runners go for due to their higher consistencies, but of course they are slower. No matter what, unsuccessful attempts at this trick can result in weird behavior. If memory IDs aren't set up correctly, the game can full on crash into a black screen. There are additionally funnier results, such as spawning the return barrel on an unfavorable frame and having it slowly sink down. Assuming you get through that huge demand of a trick, Poison Pond is yet another water stage, being very tough to learn. Lovebird shared that once you get it down though, things generally go smoothly. Once again, Enguarde is used here to deploy similar tech to before, but can also clip through mincers no problem. This specifically is used heavily near the end of the stage. This takes us into another familiar level type, with Minecart Madness up next. The stage immediately starts with rolling through the starting naughties as DK to get into the cart. Once getting under this bird, a jump input will intentionally be pressed here to take damage. This is to set up for a time-saving mid-air rolling glitch with Diddy, which once again is a trick that will only work on 1.0 and 1.1. Using a roll pattern that will keep you in the air, you perform this glitch not too long later. This ends up working because on earlier versions of the game, it thinks we are on land here for some reason. You can abuse this for a ton of the stage, but about 2/3 of the way, you'll eventually need to stop and ride the carts as normal. A few tire rolls into carts are done here to go faster. It's interesting to note that it's also possible to go for a jump roll on the two neckies right after activating the glitch. It saves a few seconds, but it's frame perfect. With that, there's one more stage on the roster before the ending boss, Blackout Basement. While this stage is something that can consistently be done, lights here go on and off in set intervals, 62 frames on the Japanese version, and the lights being off for slightly longer on the US version. This means that a lot of practice here is a major requirement due to a lack of vision here. Also, if you make a mistake, the light cycle you're used to will be thrown off, which could cause a ripple effect of further mistakes. Tucked between this gimmick is lots of extended rolling to clear gaps, skip ropes, and chaining enemies for speed. With this featuring an Omega Extendo once more, there's a very in-detail diagram for approaching this. This leads us into the very different boss of World 5, Dumb Drum. This boss is very easy, with it dumping 2 enemies on you at a time. When bouncing on the first enemy, you are invulnerable. You can then immediately bounce on the second one coming out of the can and won't take damage. Sacrificing Diddy during the fight, DK needs to be in front here since he is the only one that can jump and kill the clumps in phase 4, and then the armies in phase 5. Getting rid of Diddy here isn't a problem fortunately due to damage not pausing the drum cycles. If you stuck around this whole time, then congrats, because we are now onto the final 6 world, Chimp Caverns. Tanked Up Trouble here is a make or break stage. This is because many runs die in this stage due to it being an auto-scroller featuring a jump roll. Fortunately, there are 3 different chances to get the jump roll here. The first of these is Kremkroc, being the hardest, yet saving the most out of the 3, 55 seconds. For this, you need to do a quick wiggle between the platform and elevator as you do the jump roll. If you hit the frame and fail this wiggle, you can end up falling or landing back on a platform, which will cancel the jump roll state. After doing this, you will need to perform another wiggle near a set of Bs at the end of the stage. With this being a very tight wiggle, it can result in major time loss if failed. If you happen to get a height here that is too high, you can stall until you remove enough vertical height to clear the barrel here while DK follows behind in complete shock. If you do end up in this barrel, it'll instantly kill you. The second out of these possible jump rolls is Bird Tut, still saving around 42 to 44 seconds, with it being way easier than Kremkroc. It involves dodging a bee shortly after hitting it and then stalling for a while so you can make it under the bees at the end of the stage. Last but not least is Beef Tut, with it only saving 30 seconds. It has a bit more complicated of a setup. However, the window for the jump roll is wider here than the typical frame perfect jump rolls thanks to doing it off of a tire. The second stage here, Manic Mincers, features more jump roll action in the form of another super jump roll. This one is unique because to hit the frame here, the crate of the animal buddy, Rambi, is hit here. After hitting this frame, a couple more enemy hits are squeezed in with a tight extendo mid-air. This overall saves 10 seconds over normally playing the stage. Misty Mine continues the jump roll action in the form of a super free roll. It's easier than the one performed in World 3, but can still be very easy to choke. All you really want to make sure of is accumulating 4 hits to achieve maximum speed. All in all, this saves a little over 20 seconds. While next up in line is Loopy Light, the split up glitch needs to be performed in Manic Mincers, which will ultimately allow a wrong warp out of platform perils. This can be dangerous to play with because if damage is taken in Loopy Light, lights, the game can soft lock. Due to this, in a no reset setting, players generally set up the glitch after playing the stage. Blippi Lights itself is a very difficult and technical stage. The gimmick added this time is the claptraps here jumping whenever you jump. Additionally, the first claptrap is glitched on versions 1.0 and 1.1, and you are allowed to roll through it without taking damage. With a lot of tight jumps and rolling, one notable roll is at the very end in the B section. You can roll over a B as it's going under the ground. Overall, this stage is so dark that it is hard to develop cues for when to roll. Now it is finally time for platform perils. All you have to do here is simply throw the DK barrel right before entering the bonus barrel at the bottom of the stage. The one thing you need to be careful of here is not soft locking on the army when grabbing the barrel. With this being a very lenient trick, this saves 20 seconds over the previous route. As a reward for getting through a world heavily littered with glitches and tech, you get to fight Neki one more time. This is the hardest boss in the game, and especially when trying to play it optimally. If too early on a hit, Neki could retreat, with you having to repeat the cycle all over again. If too late though, you could damage DK and cost a second in the next boss, Rool. And speaking of, that is all that is left in Gangplank Galleon. In reality, this fight is really just a glorified cutscene. It even has fake credits that appear halfway through. It's really all about timing your jumps onto him as early as possible when he starts to try and throw his crown. Besides that, the only thing to add is that the hit before the fake credits appear is faster with DK, saving about a third of a second. After avoiding his jumps and dealing hits to him, boom, you've not just defeated Rool, but are now officially done with the entire game. Timer ends when the giant banana hits the ship floor. Yeah, kind of an anticlimactic final boss. With that is how every single stage in Donkey Kong Country is cleared in half an hour. With Lovebird dominating this category for 4 years, he has had a stronghold over the entire game, scooping up records category by category. Of course, this new major milestone wasn't just thanks to his skills though, but also with a healthily sized community chipping away at new ways to tear this apart for many years now. While this game may become more and more optimized, it's safe to say that thanks to the nature of speedrunning, that'll never truly be over. But until more things develop, that's all I have to share, so thanks for watching.